taken. But no, we did a lot of, where it's important, then it's really accurate. But there are certain licenses we've taken here and there that are really going to add more to the dramatic content of the film.
Our listeners, the nurses' hospital, which was actually built in East Los Angeles, because the cost of shooting in Hawaii was so expensive, all we really did there was the exterior shots and anything that we couldn't do or build or double somewhere else. So this set was done in Los Angeles, which gave us a lot of control, and it was a lot less money to do it there. And Nigel Phelps, the production designer, and Jennifer Williams, his set decorator, did their always phenomenal job of just giving me great sets to shoot. I mean, that's 90% of my battle. Good-looking actors, good-looking costumes, and beautiful sets. It's kind of hard to go wrong.
You're being modest, John.
Well, but I mean, it's 90% of the battle. I mean, this movie I had such rich things to photograph that it made it easier to be inspired. The actor said when they put on their wardrobe, they felt like they were becoming part of the character. When you'd see everybody in the wardrobe and the old cars, it was hard not to be inspired. I mean, I'm sure there were days when you walked on set and saw everybody dressed. You just went, oh my God, this is amazing. Neat when you'd go to lunch and see everybody, all laid out there in their wardrobe. That Kate was reading the letters in. I mean, so this was a typical day. This scene, another sequence that's coming up, and all of her scenes reading the letters were all done in one day. I remember watching the documentary for The Wild Bunch on the latest DVD, in which they talk about in 70 days they did an amazing 1,209 setups. In days on this movie, we did 3,906 setups, which averaged out to be almost 39 setups a day. So we really moved with great speed and economy on this film. And I think we kept the quality of the work, and that goes for all departments, at a very, very high level.
Our scenes were, we'd shoot the end of the battle scene when everybody was shot up and just filthy and covered with blood and smoke damage. And then we'd have to go back to them looking clean and have very little time to do it.
Yeah, like 15 minutes, get everybody changed, cleaned up, and back on the set.
It's okay.
With almost no makeup, her hair's up, but I think she looks absolutely beautiful in this scene.
I know, but
and of course Ben. I mean, Ben always looks good. What I adhered to in this movie was I felt like the movie stars in this movie needed to be lit to look like stars. So I took the time and the care to make the men look handsome and strong, and to make the women look beautiful. Which was not a difficult thing to do, because they're all young and they are beautiful. But you can also have a philosophy where you say, this is we're doing something modern, and I want it to be kind of, the lighting to be flat or harsh, or this. In this case, I really wanted it to be beautiful and rich. Rooms with these camera moves in it, and this is the real pilot's room on the USS Lexington, and that was on a Steadicam. And I mean, there is literally barely room to get the guy and the camera in there. It was so tight. This was the set you saw before. I'd earlier had said this was one of those great sets that had no walls, and it was just it was a blast to shoot in here. It was really fun to light. We had a lot of mix. You have some of the guys wearing their uniforms, some of the guys wearing these wild prints, and you had great palm trees and these chairs and practical lights, and it was so nice because it worked so much against the sort of orderedness of the army bases. It was really fun. It was like candy for your eyes.
Yeah, that bar was interesting because it was just a good excuse to have something much more frivolous. So it was interesting with the tone of the film. Very important that it wasn't all taken seriously. You do have these lighter moments. So that the hula bar was one of those times when it's a bit of comic relief. So we had this set that incorporated this large hula girl, and her skirt becomes the roof to the main part of the bar that they're all sitting at. So it's nice. It was a bit of fun.
Certainly felt when you were walking through here that it was that. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, again, these are the kind of sets we start filming in it, and the part of the set you don't see, they're still finishing building. You know, I mean, we were really on that kind of schedule. You know, don't touch that wall; the paint's not dry yet. But when you look at it all put together, it just is. It's a lot of little pieces coming together to tell a very big story.
This Hawaiian shirt that Ben's wearing, we needed just so many, and I was kind of fanatic about the authenticity of the Hawaiian shirts and doing prints that were of the period. So we actually printed the fabric and came up with this color, which I think if it were a really garish, bright Hawaiian shirt, which was also which did exist during the period, I think it would have been distracting on Ben through all the action sequences. But this is of the period, and the color's correct, and we just printed up yards and yards of this pattern and had the shirts made.
It's not like in most of the cases, they put these clothes on and they go and live a normal day. You know, they're either flying in airplanes, or they're fighting, or they're dodging bullets, so you can't just have one shirt. You know, the stuff's going to get torn up.
And the continuity, we're shooting out of continuity, so it might go from clean to dirty, then back to clean, and then, totally destroyed, and then back to clean. So, we had a few dozen of these shirts, like this one that's ensuing right now, one later on.
Of the set. Literally within about 3 feet of where the tide came at high tide. So there was some concern that if there was an exceptionally large storm surge, that it could actually erode the foundation. That the thing was it was built on just, like steel, like you'd build a rock and roll stage on. I mean, all this stuff, it was put up on a Wednesday and came down on a Monday. Practical lighting here, and you can see it and when I say practical lighting, I mean a desk lamp that you'll later see in the scene. And you'll notice when people move around, they sometimes get a little brighter or a little darker, which is in a way not traditional to movies. Movies, you try to have a control over the balance of the lighting so that if somebody moves through a room, in many cases, their exposure doesn't change. But this was a movie in which I sort of lit the environments to the way I felt they should be, and then kind of let the actors play to the way they were lit. It just seemed to work. It felt right. That's really all I can say. These are people at night, out in the middle of nowhere, because in theory it should be black, but then, you're just going to have two voices, so you have to take a certain amount of dramatic license. Much of this stuff, from my point of view, when I look at it now, this all comes out of just out of a gut feeling to light a scene this way. It's not overly intellectualized. It's just, it feels right, and I trust my subconscious. I trust my unconscious, and by the time it gets to my subconscious, it becomes something that I can tap into.
It is a destiny that will bring
Towels that they were wrapping around their head. That's actually what they are. They're not part of the uniform. It was kind of just, they had words on them, and they were a sort of protection for these flyers, and they were all hand painted, obviously.
Launching these planes off of the USS Lexington. What you're seeing, I mean, these planes are really taking off. We launched, we didn't know, because this aircraft carrier wasn't moving, but we had enough wind coming across the deck to give them the lift that they would need. It was less of a concern with the Zeros, the Kates, and the Vals, which were the 3 Japanese aircraft, the torpedo bomber, the dive bomber, and the fighter, than it was with later in the movie when you'll see the B-25s. The fleet part of Pearl Harbor, and there are 10 ships here that the Navy gave us permission to blow up. Airplanes. And we discovered very early on that if you didn't have something around them to give them a sense of scale, a real airplane looked like a model. I mean, all of these are real planes flying, and you look at them and you go, God, that looks fake. And, you know, we're sitting in Hawaii watching the aliens going, oh my God, what do we have to do to get these real planes to look real? And part of it was just putting them in a context, putting them next to a ship or fly by something that gave them a sense of scale. The nice thing was we saw this early on, so that when we got ready to blow up the ships, one of the things I said to Michael was we've got to make sure that when we do these big explosions that we have people in the foreground so we know that it's real, so that we know that the size of these ships. So when you start to see the attack, there's a lot of cameramen dressed as sailors with helmets on in skiffs, hand-holding cameras to get right in amongst the action. About was because it was Hawaii, you know it rains a lot in Hawaii, was that we could take advantage of putting water on the ground to give the production, to double our production value, because water acts as a mirror, so that if we had a plane on fire and there was a puddle of water on the ground, even if the sun was out because it could have rained 5 minutes before, you'd get a reflection of that airplane burning in the puddle of water, and it would give you the appearance of not only the sky being on fire, but also the ground being on fire. And it created a greater scale of the events than was actually happening. And it's just a photographic trick. Two airplanes were real, and then from then on they became computer generated.
Hair that I was fanatical about, but also the men's haircuts. They were, you know, very close cropped on the sides, you'll notice, and we were diligent about making sure they were cut and recut.
Production. I said to Michael, this is the movie right here. This is all about the loss of innocence. This was when they were still testing the airplanes, making sure all the engines were working. And that was a little ball field right in the middle of Ford Island, which is the air base there at Pearl Harbor. This set, that shot before, if the camera panned right or left, you would have seen somebody eating a donut. It was on stage 2 at Disney. Although there are times in all these shots in which we added airplanes, we always tried to make sure that whatever real planes we had, we put in the shot, so that, you know, the first 7 or 8 airplanes would be real, and then if there were another 30 after that, they would be comped in, they would be composited. These are all real planes right here. And the later ones are CG. These are all real airplanes. Real and fake planes. Real. So that you keep the shots moving quick enough that you don't hang on it long enough to realize that it's not a real airplane. Plus, they've gotten so good at building these models in the computer that it's pretty hard to tell what's real and what's not.
Any project, when you go into it, I mean, we all know about Pearl Harbor, we know what happened, but it's not until you actually start getting into it and you realize when you're standing inside a ship that, oh my God, you know, to be in one of these when a bomb goes through it must be a pretty nasty thing. So it was quite eerie sometimes when walking on location and walking through a couple of these battleships and thinking, these poor guys are actually caught inside it. Horrible end.
We really blew up. It was like 10,000 gallons of fuel. We were about a half a mile away, and some of the stuntmen and some of the other cameramen were a little closer. But the heat that came off of those explosions was just staggering. We actually had to shut down 2 freeways that, as you drive in, look towards Pearl Harbor, because we were worried that there'd be car crashes, so people stopping to look.
Another done drill.
A signature shot that Michael sort of dreamed up before we started the movie, and I'd say it's one of those home run shots. It's pretty amazing. In a minute, you're going to see the hand of the Steadicam assistant with a follow focus. I'll point it out to you when it comes up. The left side of the screen right there it is. Greg Irwin, ladies and gentlemen.
Of the film was, you know, one of the most, you know, intriguing things about it, because the center point of the film is the you know, destruction of Pearl Harbor. So having to, you know, break that down into creating that into physical sets, and, you know, as to how to actually achieve that by way of miniatures and CG. It was really trying to tie everything together and figure out how to actually achieve that most convincingly.
Real huge explosions here. I mean, they were quite stunning. I remember thinking 4th of July is never going to be the same again. Why?
We built was primarily to get blown up. There are all the buildings, everything is listed, so you can't touch anything. Everything is sort of protected historically. So, if you're, obviously there's a lot of machine gun strafing and bullet hits and things exploding. So every single one of those things need to have a physical element that can be destroyed. So any explosions we have they were always bits that we built specifically to get blown up.
I realize how many shots are in it. In particular, that I would say is, oh my God, we worked 2 days to get this. This is a movie that's just made up of a lot of pieces. These scenes, we did these in 2 consecutive afternoons. One was called Big Fucking Shot 1, and the other one was called Big Fucking Shot 2. And they probably had, I used every camera that I had that included first, second, and aerial unit. And I want to say probably each day we had, 16 or 17 cameras running. Now, some of them were duplicating other angles, and some of them were what we call VistaVision or plate effects cameras. But it was a lot. It was a lot on my plate to keep tabs of those days. And, everything was out on the water, so I'd have to take a boat to go talk to everybody. And once you start to wire these ships to blow, you got to be careful as to what you use for communication, because radios can set off electrical detonators. So it was a big ordeal. Sparks and smoke, which it is, but I'll tell you, when those sparks hit you, they hurt. So, it's a big deal. We blew a hole in this ship, and we just kept flying the Zeros by the door, and I kept thinking, no one's really going to believe that we did that. Those are planes going by.
Everyone's where they need to be.
Nervous because we were using a lot of explosive on this scene.
Looks incredible.
It does, and they do. But I mean, this is really, there's what we call primer cord, which is a very sort of fast exploding explosive on the ground that they had. And we gave the effects people would tell them where to run, but I mean, James King is really running through a lot of debris there. But part of it is what gives it its reality. I'm not saying that it was potentially life-threatening, but it was. You could get scraped up a little bit if you stepped in the wrong place.
Also, just the pressure on an actor to get it right, just so that they don't have to go through re-rigging the whole thing because of an error that they made.
You know what? You're absolutely right, and that I think that they were very concerned about that. Yeah, they did an amazing job. I mean, these are stuntmen, and they're paid to get it right on the first take. And obviously, when you're blowing up all these airplanes and airplane mock-ups, you don't get a take two. But everybody, I mean, down to the man, did an amazing job on this film. And we would create the environment, and then we would throw a lot of cameras at it, handheld cameras on cranes, dolly cameras. What I would generally do is say, okay, we're looking west in the morning, and we're going to look east in the afternoon, and turn a lot of guys loose. I had some great camera operators, and I let them do what they did best. We knew the signature shots we needed to get, and then I let people go and pick up the details and put them right in the midst of it. I mean, Michael's always been very good as a director of putting you right in the middle of the action. He did it on The Rock, and he did it on Armageddon, and I think he does a very good job of doing it on this movie as well.
All these beautiful, pristine white uniforms a few minutes ago, you can see the progression. And an incredible undertaking and need for manpower to have pre-fit all these people, have clean uniforms, have dirty uniforms, be aging them in between for every bullet hit, and all the transitions of what's occurring right now.
Right, I mean, you're only seeing the take that we used, but for each of these, we may have done this 5 or 6 or 7 times, and we would generally, these sequences may play 2 minutes long where it starts pristine and ends up with a guy getting a bullet hole through his chest. So then the actor has to be cleaned up, re-squibbed, redressed, then we start over. And it was amazing how quickly we could get back to one on this movie.
I mean, getting these things clean for the next day. We didn't really want them clean, so we couldn't send them out or wash them, but they had to be sanitized. I mean, we're in Hawaii, it's hot, these people are sweating, and so we had crews round the clock kind of deodorizing these actors' clothes just to make it as humane as possible.
This again is our hospital in downtown Los Angeles, and I knew that it was going to be kind of chaotic and pell-mell, so one of the things I tried to do here was design the lighting so that you could look any direction at once. That I didn't have lights on the set. It was all lights coming from the window. I mean, remember, the attack happens at 7 o'clock in the morning, so the justification is that the light can be coming through the window. It's Hawaii. Hawaii, the sunrise and sunset doesn't really change much throughout the year. The sun comes up at 6:20 and it sets at 6:20 basically every day of the year. Kind of go for this wild, handheld, frenetic style in here, and I wanted to give Michael the opportunity to basically to stage the shots in whatever way would work best for the story. Favorite stuff in the movie, and I actually, before we started filming, I worked with Panavision to build a lens that we called the Schmear lens. That was a lens that allowed me to sort of throw parts of the frame completely out of focus. And I could rotate this front element on it. And one of the reasons was we knew we were going to have to make a movie that was PG-13, but we were also going to have a movie that was going to have a considerable amount of gore and blood and missing limbs. So we figured with this lens we could throw parts of the frame selectively out of focus to help us with the graphic nature of some of the film footage we were doing. The other thing was, it just ended up becoming a great kind of lens for Evelyn's point of view. And, it was just one of these things that the more we used it, the more we got better at using it. I think on the movie in terms of just these guys, they vaporized that building. There was nothing left. When that thing blew up, it was there 1 second and gone the next. In cases, cameramen are behind sandbag bunkers with little ports that the lens is pointed through. In many cases, the cameras are not operated and they're just turned on by remote control because it's just too dangerous. And in Baja, California, where they did Titanic, and we built a ship on what the best way I can describe it is on almost like a rotisserie that we could turn it completely upside down in the water and then turn it back right side up for take two. And to do these sets where the water's flooding into them is you build the set out of steel and you hang it from a construction crane and you lower it into a pool. And as you start to lower it in, the water kind of rushes in. Everything on the deck of that ship, all those anchor chains, are all made out of rubber and foam so that when these guys slide into them, they don't get hurt. In Honolulu right there in the plane.
These days, my crew would look like they were casualties. I mean, they were just covered in fake blood and just dirt and smoke, and all the aging supplies were that they had, so diligent and using on other people, kind of.
Oh, I think we all did. I remember these scenes of like 5 vans pulling up to this nice hotel in Hawaii with all these people getting ready to go to the luau, all kind of dressed up for their big vacation, and 100 crew members looking like they had just come from the oil fields of Kuwait, stumbling into the elevators. And I can remember you would have to take literally 2 or 3 showers with a loofah to get all of the soot off of you. Who did the underwater photography on The Abyss, who's worked with me on this picture and Armageddon in the Rock, did some extraordinary underwater photography for us on this film. Just beautiful stuff. Rollover ship. And some of it is shot with this Russian crane, the Aquila, that I talked about earlier, and some of it's shot with a gyro-stabilized camera off of a 170-foot construction crane. Basically a set that we can raise and lower into a swimming pool, so that if anybody has any problem, you just very quickly give the order and they pull the damn thing right out of the water. But as you keep lowering it, it just keeps flooding with water, and you can stop it at any point, which gives you the control of being able to stage a scene. The floor is just made out of mesh so that as you pull it up, all the water drains out. Crushed that boat there, but when this thing would roll over, the first couple of times I was actually too chicken to climb on the thing, but by about halfway through the first day, it was a lot of fun to stand on the side of that ship as it would go past horizontal. You'd be, carabinered in like you were a rock climber, and it was quite a thrill to have the third thing turn completely sideways.
Hear why, even if the uniforms did exist, we wouldn't be able to rent them. I mean, they were just totally, totally destroyed. Not to mention all the hats that just floated away.
Cooperation from the Navy, and we had a lot of Navy SEALs working as sailors in these scenes, and they had the ability to basically stay in the water for 2 hours at a time. A lot of the stuff that we did, it was just extraordinary what these guys did for us in Hawaii to allow us to get the shots that we needed. It was quite amazing. You're about to drown, and we could literally lift the set out of the water in about 1 second. The scenes is, okay, we're going from a very chaotic, kind of, almost hell-like situation. So you think about this sequence, and you want the camera to be very measured. The composition's very sort of structured with a lot of kind of classic elements to them. And here it's sort of a free-for-all. It's sort of all the tricks in the book. Underexposure, playing with frame rates, playing with shutter angle, which is the amount of time that the film is exposed. Here's our Schmear lens that we had made, and essentially it allowed me to just sort of take the edge off of the graphic nature of it. And I also thought it gave it a kind of dream-like quality. I just really loved this lens because they didn't have to pull focuses critical on it. And this was a very, very tough movie for the camera department because of the amount of explosions and debris that was always being hurled at the camera. And these are very, very fine, very precise instruments. One piece of dirt can scratch an entire day's worth of film. The idea of just trying to find a way to light this stuff so that I didn't have to worry about if I panned too far to the right or the left, I'd either see a lamp or a flag or a piece of film equipment. I wanted to give Michael the freedom to just kind of do what he had to do without giving up the look. See where the Schmear is used to sort of defocus her hand where she's got her fingers on his carotid artery. Exceptionally good in all this stuff. I mean, she's just amazing. It's where she really came into her, you realize that she's really the star of this movie in Light Rig, although it was very short. Like his character in real life. He's got a lot of intensity.
That's going to get specifically blown up. Then there's a crossover between what construction are doing and then what effects are doing. So typically speaking, construction, they'll be talking with special effects about what they're making it out of. But ultimately, effects will come in and they'll whether it's a car, for example, is probably a good way of putting it. They'll take a real car and then they'll drill all the bullet hits and then take all of the explosive elements, and anything that's going to fly off will be lightweight, that won't hurt anybody. So it's you make it to look good, and then effects come in and add all the elements that are going to be flying away. It could hurt anyone.
No, but it took a lot of coordination with the camera operators, and a pilot on the ground who would talk to the pilots in the air about their position so that we could make sure that they were in the frame. As the camera's dollying around, that we can track with them. And I was really concerned before we started the movie, how are we going to be able to coordinate this? But these guys were such great pilots, and I had a great ground coordinator, a pilot named Dirk Valley, and he really allowed us to put these planes pretty much right on the money every time. It was one of the really wonderful sort of discoveries as we were filming that was not a problem.
Craft was the paint schemes and the colours, and and there again we took license with those because photographically it was very important to Michael that the zeros and the Kates and the Vals, that they had distinctive looking paint schemes, and photographically we painted some of them silver just to make them photograph better in the sky. So there was certain licenses taken there, but it's all to make it look better. That's the idea, and just to stand out from the P40s, so there's more contrast.
to hide a lot of modern buildings in the backgrounds. And John Fraser, our special effects coordinator, designed these things, we called them coffins, and they used propane to superheat diesel fuel in these long kind of like troughs, and we had 30 of them, and we could literally build a mile of black smoke used to hide the background. And the one nice thing for me was that it gave me a tool to light with, or at least to try to match continuity, because some days it would be raining and some days it'd be sunny. But once the attack started, I had the ability to use a lot of black smoke to help me with continuity. Machine guns were so loud that you had to keep your mouth open when they fired so that you didn't break your eardrums. Not if you were firing them, but if you were standing in front of them, because of the amount of air pressure they moved coming out of the muzzles of them. They were insane. I'm sure that Michael probably put the Michael Bay dance on the DVD, which was during one of the scenes he was operating a camera and there was a 50 caliber machine gun next to him, and as soon as it went off he dropped the camera and got into the fetal position, but the camera was pointed at him and he literally was on the ground sort of rocking like a baby with his hands over his ears for about a minute. And whenever we felt like we needed a moment to laugh, we would watch that film over and over again throughout the entire filming of this movie. That was damaged on the entire film happens right. Didn't destroy one camera on this movie.
In place. We actually had a guy called Jeff Hubbard who was handling most of Ford Island as I was preparing all of Mexico and all the other bits and pieces. I actually flew over and had a meeting in Ford Island once everything was up and dressed and shooting, and it was amazing. It was really fantastic. After being in all the meetings beforehand where you're figuring out what you're going to do, looking at reference photographs, looking at what was and what it is now, and how you had to chop down a few trees and repaint buildings to make them look, as they were then. And then turning up there on the day of shooting to see 9 Japanese planes roaring through the sky and explosions going up. Oh, absolutely fantastic. It just filled me with a complete adrenaline rush, and I came running back to LA, just singing the praises of everyone. It was really good.
Them in the cockpit are done with a plane on the ground, and we just move the camera and the lights around to give the sensation that they're actually flying. The mock-up, and we can roll the camera and we can do all that to kind of give it a sense that you're in the air. The nice thing is, since you're in the air, all there really is sky around you. You don't get a sense of movement as much, so you create the movement by the camera. Tiny to try to mount a camera inside the cockpit. Time to get clearance to get up to the top of that tower. It was so rusted, it was considered unsafe, but they allowed us to I went up there with another camera, and it's like 200 feet. You got to climb up these rusty old stairs to get up there. It's quite a view up there, but black smoke we could make when we needed to. The guys who were flying the airplanes do a great job, but the guys who were flying the camera ships as well, who were right on their tail, sometimes they were flying in a T-28, an adapted T-28 trainer with cameras pointed forward and backwards, would do an amazing job. This stuff I remember because these planes were so low to the ground. I mean, these P-40s here are like 8 feet off the ground. It was just insane. I mean, not insane that we were in danger, but just that these guys could fly that low. Got us kicked off of Hawaii. It was a little gnarly up here. I mean, it was sort of shook. But you're going to see we fly the planes very close to the tower. So close, in fact, that we almost were, this almost shut us down. That's what I said, I could read the instruments inside the cockpit of the airplane. From a helicopter back onto the tower, and then everything else from the tower. This is me with a camera handheld. That airplane, you could touch it. Shot, what we did, we put a wing on top of the building with a big fireball and blew it off and shot the wing at the camera. From the moment the airplane rounds the tower till the point it hits the top of that building is a CG shot. From the moment it hits the building to the end of it, it's done physically with debris and a fireball. I'm going to create a plane disappearing than it is to make one appear. So you would take a shot of a regular plane flying and add smoke to it, and then, essentially erase it like you would do in Photoshop with an eraser tool, but maybe add a fireball as you're erasing it. In this DVD are computer savvy, and probably a lot of them are familiar with Adobe Photoshop. I mean, essentially what you're doing is like, 200,000 pictures, and you're using all of those tools that they have in Photoshop to erase things, add things, and do it on a level of very high aesthetic taste. And it's slow going, but the payoff is huge. Better the film is that you start with, the better it's going to be on the other end. If that plane would bank off the one that was shot down and do like a barrel roll away, and what the matte artist would do is then just erase part of the wing and add a fireball to it. Moving outside to give it the sense of the ship's at sea. You start, and these guys are wearing these beautiful uniforms, but at this point in the movie now they've become a whole new set of clothes in essence, because they're torn, they're burnt, they're covered in black, and it's a whole other palette. There's here inside the hospital now, we're in a whole other palette. We're really seeing a lot of red here, which we hadn't seen in a while, and it was fascinating every day to go to work and film, because there was so much going on.
Closely with the special effects makeup people, so that the clothes would be torn and burnt where the prosthetic wounds would be. So they were hand in hand, so to speak.
And it's things you take for granted, but you're going to see a bunch of guys walking into the hospital covered in oil. Now, you can't pour motor oil on actors and have them walk to the camera, so it becomes, okay, what do you use to create the sense of oil that at the end of the day these people can wash off and go home? There's so much more to it than meets the eye. You're coming up in a second. I mean, look at these guys. They're all going to be covered in burns and in oil, and it's extraordinary. All these guys. And it ended up being, I think, methicellulose, which is like a bread thickener, and some type of water-soluble pigment. Difficult to film. They were very emotional when we were on the set, because, everybody was moaning, and you had amputees with dressed wounds, and Stan Winston and his people did an amazing job with all of the special makeup effects. And it was, I was about to say, after we used to do some of those big explosions, I'd go walk the set, and the dummies were so lifelike, you were always worried that, was that a stuntman or was that a prosthetic body? And you can imagine standing in the middle of this, it was horrific.
What you're seeing are World War I helmets. The deeper bow-like helmets, which we associate with World War II, didn't come out until 1942, when we started producing vast amounts of uniforms once we entered the war. And the helmets changed, and I guess a lot of things changed uniform-wise.
Here was actually something that had never been done. Michael wanted to have a crane shot that started underwater and came out of the water, and Pete Romano, who was our underwater cameraman, who also builds a lot of gear, I said to him, can you build me an underwater remote head to do this shot? And he said, yeah, no problem. And he said, how long, when do you need it? And I said, in 9 days, which was a lot of what happened. Now, this was, again, filmed on our tank, where they filmed Titanic in Baja, and we did some extraordinary stuff here. I really, I thought, at this point in the filming, we were really at our peak in terms of a crew. We were really, every day we were getting amazing work. This is our tank again. It was quite stunning, the amount of control we had there and what we could do. It was really some of the most fulfilling days for me in terms of what I was doing on a technical level. Just being able to have so much control over the image.
I mean, there was a limit to how much time they could be in the water. The water was, not as warm as you would like it to be.
Not here. At least it was only 4 feet deep, and they could walk out to the side to warm up. But so it made it more This was more accessible than Hawaii was for everybody. But the water was cold. You know, the actors had to wear their uniforms. I had a dry suit. You know, I was comfortable. I could walk into the water and stay there all day because I had, you know, the $900 dry suit on. Everybody else is floating in the water is wearing basically, you know, their canvas uniforms.
Grounds we shot in Hawaii because, you know, the just the landscape and the garden and the light and everything was just beautiful. But logistically, we came back to LA to shoot the interior and the entrance of the hospital because in the script we had to establish an entrance to the hospital, and then that was all going to get blown up. So it was always going to be a build. So it felt the best way to do it would be here back in LA, where, you know, we've got much more control over that. And so, you know, we had a location that again is used a lot is Linda Vista downtown. But the main elements that we were shooting is this ward that we, you know, that we built, and it's a perspectivized set actually to make it feel bigger. But that was a really long, like 120-foot long ward, and that was cool because that just had to have a big explosion that, you know, that blew the place apart. So, you know, we built this ward and this entrance onto this location. So again, it's one of those locations that, you know, you won't recognize when you see those shots because, you know, we've added so much to it that it changes the characteristics of it enough that you won't know it.
Told to me that one of the reasons why there were less people killed in Pearl Harbor than could have been was that it was early in the month and the sailors still had a lot of their cash in their pockets. So a lot of them, when the ships were in port, apparently only 20% of the sailors had to stay aboard the ship. So in the early part of the month, they had a lot of money, and a lot of them went and stayed in town where they could go to the bars and, you know, whatever else they did. But Hawaii was expensive, so generally by around the 20th of the month, they would be out of money. So that the ships were always more crowded at the end of the month than they were at the beginning of the month. And the attack took place on December 7th. So if it had taken place on December 27th, chances are that instead of having 20% of the sailors on the ships, it could have been 70% of the sailors on the ships. And the body count could have even been higher.
You know, Michael would spell out to me what was important to him about any given scene. With Roosevelt's speech, you know, that was a very good example. You know, because you have the House of Representatives that, you know, you could be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on building this set, but he had a very clear idea all the time. They just wanted to have this focus of light, you know, on the podiums, and everything else would just fall off into black very quickly. So you just needed to have foreground chairs and people, and let everything just fall off. So it read as a very, very big set, and in fact it was, you know, relatively small. But, you know, that's, you know, it's just a good trick. But you have to have the director, that has to come from the director, because you can get into real trouble then if you only build 30 foot of set and the other 150 is missing. You know, you have to go into it knowing that everything's going to be falling off into black pretty quickly.
In black and white, and I just tried to bring it to life in color in a way that felt like it was still true to the black and white image. And I was very happy with the way this turned out.
Transformation was amazing to see. Even his voice and his enunciation.
I mean, you know, to watch an actor with his skill work was just, it was a you know, it's what made you want to get into this business in the first place, to be a part of that kind of experience. Be very relevant to what has happened in the world in the last few weeks.
Disc 2, coming soon.